Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to read to you an extract from the short story I wrote about the Battle of Orgreave. The reason I chose Orgreave to write about in particular was because it made a very strong impression on me at the time. Even though I was a long way away from where it happened, I was travelling, I was in my early to mid-20s at the time, and I was travelling in Asia, and I was working in Hong Kong teaching English. And a friend who I was travelling with and I had rented this sort of grotty bedsit in Kowloon, and we had a portable black and white telly that we could pick up news channels on, and we watched the footage of the Battle of Orgreave unfolding, not quite realising what we were seeing at the time, because it looked, it was a Chinese channel, and there were Chinese sort of text on the screen, and we didn't really know what we were witnessing. And at first I thought I was looking at something from Pinochet's Chile, and then realised that actually it was Orgreave, and there were British police dealing with striking coal miners. So that made a strong impression on me, and when Ra sent the list of protests for authors to choose, Orgreave was the one that leapt out at me. I'm sure most of you don't need telling, but just in a very brief summary, Orgreave was a coking plant where coal was turned into coke for use in the steel industry, and it was shipped from Orgreave, which is near Rotherham, and taken to the Scunthorpe, British steel plant at Scunthorpe. And 2 or 3 months into the 1984 strike, the National Union of Mine Workers were targeting Orgreave with a mass picket to try and prevent the lorries entering to collect the coke, or to prevent them from leaving with the coke. The Battle of Orgreave actually was the culmination of about 3 or 4 weeks of activity by the pickets. So I'm going to read to you the brief opening scene from the story, and then explain a little bit of the context of the story, and then read a slightly longer extract from further into the piece. The story is called Withen, which is the fictional village, mining village, where most of the action is set. 2014. Everyone filed out of the chapel to gather by the wreaths, which were arranged in front of the stand bearing Dad's name, sharpening the air with their scent. We stood in the September sunshine, too warm in our formal clothes. People said what a lovely service it had been. My sister-in-law, Tanya, told me how much she'd liked my speech. You did Don proud, she said. The note cards were still in my fist, bent into a tube and damp with sweat. I thanked her, slipped the cards into my pocket of my suit jacket. Susie caught my eye through the crowd of mourners and mouthed, "Are you okay?" I nodded. She was with Mam, stooping to retrieve the cellophane-wrapped messages and reading them out to her, the dutiful daughter-in-law. Not that my mother would have had more than the vaguest idea who Susie was. Rich nudged my elbow. "What the fuck's he doing here?" he said under his breath. I looked where he was looking. A figure stood at the top of the steps and climbed a grass embankment above the chapel. The thick brows, the great dome of his head. Uncle Peter. 30 years older than the last time I'd set eyes on him, but unmistakable. It should have fallen to me to take charge of the situation, but ever since the two of us were big enough to fight, the age difference between me and Rich seemed notional. I was the kid brother, I just happened to have been born first. That's how it had been when I was a boy. I felt no different now, aged 53. So we just pretend we haven't seen him, Rich said, as if I'd suggested exactly that. Tanya must have cottoned on that something was wrong. Who is it? Dad's brother, I told her. She hadn't met Uncle Peter, but it was clear that she knew all about him. She laid a hand on my brother's sleeve. Don't make a scene, Rich. Not today, not here. Rich freed his arm and, before we could stop him, made his way over to the steps. So that's the opening scene set in 2014 at Rotherham Crematorium, where the narrator, Matt, is at his father's, or just after his father's funeral, and as you'll have heard, his uncle Peter has turned up. They've been estranged for 30 years because of events that happened during the miners' strike, which are at the centre of the story. The story is told in alternating sections between 2014 and 1984. Now I'm going to read to you a short section from 1984 now. Matt, at this point, is in his early 20s, and is, as I was at the time I saw the events from Orgreave, was travelling in Asia and has been in Hong Kong with a girl that he met while he was travelling. Matt is a journalist by profession. He left Withen, left South Yorkshire and moved to London to become a journalist. His brother, his father, his uncle all work in Withen Main Colliery, the coal mine in the village where they grew up. But he's lived away from home for a long time. Has been travelling for nearly a year by this point. His travelling plans, though, are disrupted when he phones home and his mother tells him that his father has been badly injured at Orgreave, and we join Matt as he returns home having heard that news. It was Sunday before I could get a flight out of Hong Kong. Another day before I stepped off the bus at Withen. Dad had been discharged the day before. He was lying in bed with the curtains shut when Mam took me up. The light gave him headaches, she explained. The room smelled of stale sweat and the lemon barley water which stood in a jug at the bedside table. Matt's here, love, but Dad was dozing. I set the dressing table stool beside the bed and watched him sleep while Mam went downstairs to make a brew. In the gloom, the gauze patch on his head might have been a scrap of paper that had blown in through the window and landed there. Dad looked as if he'd aged about 10 years in the 10 months since I'd last seen him. He woke before Mam reappeared, rolling his head to one side and blinking at me as if I might be a figment of his imagination. Hello, Dad. Well, what are you doing here? Nice to see you too. You should have stayed in Hong Kong. That whack on the head has made you less grumpy then. I told her you'd do this. Mam, he meant. Told her not to say out to you. Mam was in the doorway carrying a tray of tea and biscuits. The logo on one of the mugs read NUM, support the miners. Who's her, she said, the cat's mother? Dad pushed himself up into a sitting position while I replaced the pillows at his back. How long have you had the ponytail? He asked. A couple of months, I said. Don't start on him, Don, he's just flown halfway around world to see you. When Rich came in later, he gave the ponytail a flick. Are you Matt's girlfriend? Yeah, very funny, I said. Hey Dad, what do you reckon? My brother half turned me towards the bed. Is it just me or does Matt look like the back end of a police horse? The ponytail had been Becca's idea. My hair was already collar length when I left England and I decided not to cut it the whole time I was away. You know what would really suit you, she said, trailing her fingers through my hair after the first time we'd made love. So I was a ponytailed man. We'd been politely awkward with each other during my last 3 days in Kowloon, as if preparing for or protecting ourselves from the other's absence. We revised our plans. I would somehow scrape together enough cash to fly out and rejoin her when Dad was fully recovered. If I couldn't, she'd travel to Europe anyway, to England. I'd been home 2 weeks when I received a blue airmail envelope. It contained a long, lovely letter, which ended with Becca saying she decided to go to Japan instead. The editor at the South London Press agreed to rehire me as a features writer. I moved back down to London. Anything spare from my wages I sent to Mam and Dad. The strike was 4 months old by then, and Mam was the only one bringing any money into the house, from the little she earned as a school dinner lady and the part-time cleaning job she'd taken on. They'd sold the car, Rich's drum kit and hi-fi system, the bone china crockery and walnut sideboard that Mam had inherited from Gran. Most of their food came from donations to Withen Women Against Pit Closures, which the committee divvied up between the striking families. When she wasn't working on making sandwiches at the welfare or shaking a collection bucket in Rotherham, Mam toured the country with some of the other women to give talks and raise funds. I'd even set up a visit to South London to address the local trades council. To see her before a room full of strangers, nerveless, articulate, informed, was a revelation. At home, the sole woman in a house of opinionated men, she was usually more of an observer than a participant whenever politics cropped up. But there she was at Lambeth Town Hall, bringing 100 people to their feet in applause. I recorded every word for the piece we ran in the paper. Make no mistake, she said, this dispute isn't just about coal mines or mining industry or miners, it's about all of us, all of you. What we're witnessing is now less than a planned attack on British working class and our communities. Mr. Ridley, Mr. McGregor, Mrs. Thatcher, they hate us. And if we let them, they will destroy us. When the clapping finally subsided, she went on, the Prime Minister didn't batter my husband at Orgreave. She didn't put him in hospital. You won't find her fingerprints on that truncheon. Man paused. But when I look at my husband, my Don, and see what he's become since that day, Mrs. Thatcher's shadow hangs over him as surely as if she were standing right there in the room. The police didn't charge Dad in the end. They might as well have banged him up in a cell though, because he'd more or less imprisoned himself in his own home. He spent most of his waking hours watching television, filling the living room with cigarette smoke. He no longer picketed, seldom left the house at all except to sit in the backyard with the Daily Mirror or the Rotherham Advertiser if the weather was fine. The doctors couldn't tell if the speech impediment was physical or psychosomatic. He's lost confidence in himself, Mam said, when I was at home one weekend and we were alone in the kitchen. A cupboard door bangs and he jumps like he's been shot. He looks as if he's lost weight, I said. Well, he would do. There aren't many calories in Woodbines and PG tips. I tried to piece together what had happened to him at Orgreave, but Dad was reticent about it, and Rich had become separated from him in the chaos and so didn't witness the incident. According to Uncle Peter, Dad was hiding behind an ice cream van when he got hit. An ice cream van, I said. Aye, Rock On Tommy, it were called. He, Aunt Sylvia and our cousins had come round for Sunday dinner because it was cheaper to use one oven than two. I'd gone on to Asda to buy some sarnies and left your dad queuing for 99s, Uncle Peter said. Blimey, Rich said, you two aren't exactly Fidel Castro and Che fucking Guevara, are you? We all laughed around the table, even Mam, despite the language, even Dad. When I headed back from the supermarket, Uncle Peter went on, the street was swarming with coppers, chasing our lads all over the place, running into folks' gardens and everywhere. You were already on ground by then, Don. This fella from Thurcroft had taken off his t-shirt and we're using it to stop blood from where you'd been clobbered. Do you remember any of that, Dad? I asked. I remember paying for 99s, but I don't remember getting any change. The thing from that day that sticks in Dad's mind above all else is the vibration from the police horses' hooves as they cantered across the field. You could feel it in your feet and right up your legs. I've lost count of the times he's told me that in the years since. In the film footage and photos which I've trawled through, I've only ever found one shot of my father at Orgreave. It's in a video clip of pickets rolling a tractor tyre down the slope towards the police lines. You can make out Dad, Uncle Peter and my brother in the background. Dad throws his head back, amused by something Uncle Peter says. They look happy, drenched in sunshine, shirtless in Rich's case, like three men on a works outing to the seaside. I've asked, but none of them can recall what my uncle said to make Dad laugh. Thank you.